Hey, awesome people, welcome to this week's episode of So Addicts. Hi guys, welcome to this week's tutorial. I am so excited about this one. It was awesome, it was badass, and you know what? I enjoyed putting it together. Today, we are making, why am I making a drum roll? You already know what you're here for. We are making a crop hoodie. We're making a crop hoodie, guys. I was super excited about this tutorial. I don't know, it just gave me this inner badass strength or something. I looked fierce and I love the way this hoodie came out. I also feel like it's a great, transition to fall look. You have the sleeves to protect you from the cold, but you still get to show a little bit of core or stomach action down there. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you do enjoy what you see so far, please make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can be part of the So Addicts family. And I hope to catch you guys at the end of this tutorial. So here I have 1.5 yards in my black knit fabric and 1/2 yard in my white knit fabric. If you were using just one fabric, you would require about 2 yards total. So then you want to grab one of your favorite hoodies. This is what we're going to use to draft our pattern. So the first thing you want to do is basically fold the front of your hoodie in half. You want to make sure to attach all your seams and points together. You can also put some pins in your hoodie just so your fabric lays neatly in half. Then we're going to grab our main fabric and we're going to put our main fabric on fold. Now we're going to take our hoodie and place the hoodie on the center front of our main fabric. Again, you can also put some pins in just so your fabric stays neatly in half. Now we're going to go ahead and actually trace the front neckline, as you guys can see, of our hoodie. So I'm just flipping over my fabric here and just tracing that exact neckline seam. After tracing the neckline, then we're going to move on to our shoulders. After the shoulders, we're going to trace the side seams and also the armhole. After tracing all this, now we have our front pattern. Then you want to make sure to straighten out all your lines. So I'm just straightening out my curve for my neckline, my shoulders, my armhole, and also my side seam. So at this point, if you wanted to make your hoodie a little bit more form-fitted, you would be coming in here at the side seams, however amount of inches you wanted to get rid of. But I was happy with the size of mine, so I left it as is. Then you want to measure the length of your cropped hoodie. So I measured 9 inches down from my armhole, and now I'm just squaring that line off at the bottom. After this, you're pretty much done with your front pattern. Now we're just going to go ahead and add a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around our sides, and I'm just cutting that out. Now moving on to the back is relatively the same as the front. You just want to make sure to put your fabric again on fold, and we're also folding our hoodie in half, but this time on the back side. So now again, I'm placing my fabric in the center back, and again, I'm tracing my back neckline, as you guys can see. After tracing the neckline, then we're going to move on to the shoulders, the armhole, and also the side seams. I'm measuring down those 9 inches at my side seams, adding my 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'm cutting out just like we did for the front. Now moving on to our sleeve, again you want to put your fabric neatly on fold, and now we're going to grab one sleeve and make sure that this edge is going to be placed on the folded edge of our fabric. Before we do that though, I'm going to be dividing my sleeves in half. So if you're not going to be dividing your sleeves, you don't have to do this step. But since I'm going to be dividing that and actually folding that other half under my sleeve. Now we're going to take that section and place it at the edge of our fabric, and I'm just pinning all around, making sure it stays neatly in place. After pinning all around, then we're going to go ahead and actually trace that portion of our sleeve out. You also want to make sure to trace your armhole. As you guys can see, I'm making sure to mark that curve all around. After marking that, you can take your hoodie off your fabric, and you just want to make sure to trace out those lines neatly, add a 1/2 inch seam allowance around the edges, and also cut it out. You also want to make sure to cut this pattern in two for your other side as well. After cutting it out, then we're going to move on to the bottom part. So since we folded that side over, now we're going to be opening that other side out, and this is the side we're going to trace. So I just traced along the edges with some pins since I really couldn't use my chalk since this fabric was white. So after tracing along the edges with some pins, then we're going to go in again, making sure that all our lines are nice and straight, as you guys can see. Then you also want to make sure to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around and then cut it out. So now we're going to move on to the hoodie. So again, we're putting our fabric on fold, but this time we're actually going to be drawing a 1/2 inch seam allowance from the edge. So I'm just drawing that down, and I'm also putting in some pins so my fabric stays neatly in half. Now we're going to be grabbing our hoodie. So for our hoodie, we're going to be folding our hoodie just like this, neatly in half, and placing this opening edge at the edge of our fabric. So this edge we're placing at the fabric, and then we're going to go ahead and trace the hoodie out from the top to the bottom. So we're tracing the neckline. Again, you want to make sure that you really do get the direction and the curve of this hoodie neckline. So I'm just walking that slowly and tracing it all around. After that, you want to make sure to straighten out all your lines of your hoodie, add a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then cut out. So cutting out the front, you want to make sure to separate that fold, as you guys can see, and then trim the rest. So at this point, you successfully cut out your front and back pattern for your cropped hoodie. And then we've also cut out our sleeves, the left and right, and the black and white sections as well. Last but not the least, we have our hoodie cut out in the main fabric and also a lining fabric. You can cut out the lining fabric in the main fabric if you would like, but I use a different fabric. So now we're going to move ahead to joining our front and back together. So you want to connect your front and back at the shoulders and the side seams. So I just placed mine on the sewing machine, as you guys can see, connecting at the shoulders and side seams. After connecting, it should look like this. So I also went ahead and serged my edges as well. Now we're going to move on to our sleeves. So for our sleeves, as you guys can see, since I do have two portions, I'm going to be attaching these two sections together. If you don't have two sections, you don't have to worry about this step. So now I'm just pinning those edges down, and I'm going to sew this at a 1/2 inch. After sewing it down, it should look like this. So I also went ahead and edge stitched on the black part of the fabric. I also edge stitched that down, as you guys can see. So this just allows it to let that seam stay neatly in place. After edge stitching, then we're going to be folding over right sides to right sides and sewing that down at a 1/2 inch. After sewing it down, it should look like this. Make sure to press along the way. Now moving on to our hoodie. So for our hoodie, we are going to be attaching this by placing our right sides of our hoodie together. So you want to make sure to sew down from this edge all the way down to this edge at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure to do the same thing for your lining as well. After sewing it down, it should look like this. So keep in mind that when you've completed sewing down your hoodie, you want to make sure that the left side of your lining is basically facing the left side of your main fabric. So as you guys can see, I'm just putting in the lining in my main fabric here. Now we're going to go ahead and actually flip that over, making sure that the right side of our lining is facing the right side of our main fabric. This is how we're going to sew this down at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm making sure to pin from one edge all around to the other edge. So you want to make sure to sew this at a 1/2 inch. After sewing it down, it should look like this. Again, make sure to press every step of the way. Now we're going to go ahead and actually top stitch this at 3/4 of an inch. So as you guys can see, I'm placing a pin, just marking that 3/4 line, and we're going to be top stitching this from one edge all the way to the other side. After sewing it down, it should look like this. Now we're going to go ahead and attach the hoodie to the main fabric. Now placing the hoodie in the main fabric, you want to make sure to start from your seam here placing it at the center back. So I'm just pinning this down, and now I'm going to walk the both sides of my hoodie all the way to the center front. So again, I'm just marking my center front so I know my front is indeed in the middle. So I'm just walking one side and pinning as I go. Now I'm just going to do the same for the other side. Now when it comes to the other side, you want to make sure to just overlap the edge over the previous edge just a little bit. So we're going to be overlapping one side over another just a little bit and pinning all around just like we did before. After sewing it down, it should look like this. Nice and neat. Now we're going to move on to creating cuffs for our sleeves. So to create cuffs for the sleeves, you want to make sure to measure the width of our sleeve opening. So right now mine is about 4.5 inches folded, which is 9 inches total. Then you want to cut out a rectangular piece that's about 6 inches wide and 9 inches, which is the width of our sleeve opening, plus a 1/2 inch. So after cutting this piece out, first we're going to be folding over once and folding over again. Now at this corner, we're going to be trimming off a 1/2 inch and cutting at a slant motion all the way to the top. Now this is going to give us that tapered look for our sleeve. After that, we're going to be folding this over right sides to right sides and sewing that down on the sewing machine at a 1/2 inch. After sewing it down, make sure to press and it should look like this. Then we're going to be folding this over in half again. Now this is what we're going to walk into our sleeve. So you want to make sure to attach that seam there to the seam of your main sleeve. So I'm just going to walk my cuff piece around my main sleeve. Now keep in mind that when you're sewing this, it's going to be just a little tighter than your main sleeve. So you want to make sure to stretch as you're sewing down on the sewing machine. This is going to give it a really, really nice fitted look. After sewing down, it should look like this. So now we have both sleeves completed. I also went ahead and serged all my edges. After sewing that down, now we're going to attach to our main fabric. So again, you want to make sure that your seams are matching right there, side seams to the seams of my sleeve. Also making sure that the top of my sleeve is also matching my shoulders right there, as you guys can see. Making sure to pin your right sides matching right sides. So I'm just going to walk this all around my sleeve, making sure to pin, and I'm also going to be sewing this at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So at this point, you are almost done with your hoodie. Your sleeve should be laying nice and flat. Do not also forget to keep pressing along the way. Now to finish up the hem of our cropped hoodie. So at this point, I actually tried mine on and noticed it was still a little too long. So I went ahead and actually trimmed off about 2 inches. So again, you can try it on, but I'm actually not going to be finishing this off because I do really like the raw edge and it doesn't actually fray. So I'm just going to cut that away, as you guys can see, with no seam allowance. Now, if you did have a raw edge or something else, you can definitely just fold it over twice and top stitch that if you wanted to. But I do love my cropped look. So after finishing up the hem, your hoodie is pretty much ready to wear. This tutorial. I do appreciate each and every one of you for joining me on this episode of Sew Addicts. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I love the way mine came out. I looked fierce, badass, and it was just awesome. I hope you guys have fun making this. If you did like this tutorial, please give this video a big thumbs up. If you do make this or any of my other tutorials, please tag me in all your photos at DamiaDinaKX on Instagram. Any questions, suggestions, scroll down, leave me a couple of words, and do not forget to hit the subscribe button so you can be part of the awesome Sew Addicts family. And I hope to catch you guys next week.